It's time for the real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in. No matter how you're tuning in, it is greatly appreciated. Big show today. Shehan Jeyarajah of CBS Sports. He's going to join the show coming up here in 20 minutes. We're going to talk a little college football playoff. Notre Dame getting ready to take on Penn State tonight. And then Luke Brennaman, he's going to join me at 11. We're going to talk IU hoops and probably a little bit more Notre Dame, Penn State, because it was not going to watch that game tonight. I hope you watched your Indiana basketball Hoosiers last night because they just keep it rolling, right? Handled Indiana pretty thoroughly. Okay, they've now won 5 in a row. 3 of those wins came in Big Ten conference play. They're 4-1 in conference play, and they're a legitimately good basketball team. It's hard not to like what we've seen from IU as of late. And Mike Woodson was asked last night after their victory why the Hoosiers have been playing so well.
When we're scrappy and defending and rebounding the ball as a unit and able to get out and play a little faster instead of staying in the half-court game, that's Indiana basketball. And we've had some glimpses of it off and on. I thought these last 3-4 games, we're playing much better now, much shooting the ball better from the three-point line. We didn't shoot it well tonight, but we had good looks, and we got to continue to take those shots when we have them.
Indiana basketball coach Mike Woodson right there talking about why the Hoosiers have been playing really good basketball here as of late. Once again, won 5 in a row, 3 straight in Big Ten play. And as well as Indiana has been playing as of late, you could argue their best basketball of the season. The first 8 to 12 minutes of that game last night was pretty rough. USC up 19-9 at the under 12 timeout. Indiana just came out looking pretty flat. And I said it yesterday that they were going to play against a USC team that is going to be very well coached. Coach Musselman, one of the better coaches in the world of college basketball. And it didn't seem like Indiana came out ready to play. They were really sloppy. They were turning the basketball over. Indiana turned the ball over 6 times last night. 4 of those turnovers came in the first 8 minutes of the game. Mackenzie Mbako looked at the rim, and he was like, you know what? I'm not missing tonight. And he took some decent shots and then some not so great shots, and he started 0 of 7 from the floor. He was so bad in those first 8 minutes that he actually barely played last night. He barely played. Okay, for the final 32 minutes of the game, though, after that under 12 timeout, I mean, it was Hoosiers all the way. They dominated the game the rest of the way. They outscored USC 71-50 after those first awful 8 minutes. And they looked like the Indiana team that's now won 5 games in a row and has been really dominant. They gave Omar Ballo the basketball. Trey Galloway made good decisions. Luke Goody shot the ball incredibly well from 3. Bryson Tucker came in off the bench and scored some buckets. They looked really good in those final 32 minutes. And part of why Indiana struggled early, part of it was the turnovers. The other part of it was they weren't guarding the ball. Like I said, they just came out flat, which is a little annoying. I don't know how you come out flat at home in a conference game. That should never happen. But to Mike Woodson's credit, he righted the ship at that under 12 timeout. They fixed those 2 things. There was a little more energy, a little more effort on the ball, keeping the ball handler in front of them. Omar Ballo, he got more touches. They took Mackenzie Mbako out of the game because he was messing things up. And from there, they just rolled. And the Mackenzie Mbako struggles last night were surprising. It is no secret. I like Mackenzie Mbako. I think he's a really good player. I think he's an NBA type guy. The way that he shoots it and the size that he has, he can get his own shot. He just came out last night and pretty simply wasn't making shots. And at some point, when you start 0 of 7, you kind of force your coach's hand at some point. And here's Mike Woodson talking last night about why Mackenzie Mbako didn't play so much and just about the struggles that he had overall.
No, it is. I mean, and that's kind of the makeup of our ball club. Every Big Ten team is talented and deep. and well coached. And, when someone is struggling, Mac was struggling tonight. And, I can't, I gotta search too as a coach. I mean, that's what we do. And no knock against Mac. He'll be back in there tomorrow and he'll be ready to go hopefully for the Iowa game. But I gotta lean on everybody. It's what you do with the minutes that you get. And I thought the guys that came in off the bench gave us some positive minutes tonight, and that set us up to win a ball game.
Mike Woodson right there talking about the struggles that McKenzie and Mbako had and the help that they got off the bench and just the guys who were able to come in and play well. Like, it's a great thing that Luke Goody shot the crap out of the ball last night. I mean, it felt like he didn't miss, and he played really well, shot the ball well, helped rebound. Just a really good game from Luke Goody. And then Bryson Tucker, the freshman, he comes in and he was great. I love watching him play. I think he's really good. I think he's smart, and he was great last night. He, in fact, closed the game over McKenzie and Mbako. I kept waiting for Mike Woodson to go back to his sophomore star, and it just didn't happen. He was like, we're rolling with Bryson Tucker. He's making shots. He's playing defense. He's crashing the glass. Bryson Tucker played really well last night. I thought early he got to his spot offensively. I'm not a big, fall away, mid-range jump shot guy. But, hey, man, Bryson Tucker, he hit those 2 jumpers early. He finished at the rim pretty well. He did take a couple of bad shots early, right? He hit those first 2 and then was like, let me try to go one-on-one and see if I can get to the rim. And he couldn't, and he missed a shot, and he ended up committing a really bad foul. But besides for that, he was really good. And I really enjoyed watching him play. He's a good, active defender. He's long. I feel like he just has a really good feel for the game. Like he's never in the way. You watch some freshmen, their first year of college basketball, or you watch some rookies their first year in the NBA, where they just kind of wind up in the way. It's like they don't know where to be. Bryson Tucker does not have that issue. I feel like he's in the right spot 95% of the time. The effort is there, and he's just a blast to watch. It's fun watching freshmen figure out how to fit in, and he looked good last night. And as Coach Woodson said, like, it's what you do with the minutes that you get. I feel like every time Bryson Tucker gets minutes, he plays well, and he earns himself the right to be considered for more minutes going forward. Now, as good as Bryson Tucker was, and as well as Luke Goody shot the ball, make no mistake about it, we all know why Indiana won. It's because Omar Ballo is just an absolute unit underneath the bucket. I mean, every time he touches the ball, I feel like Indiana is going to get a good shot. He's not a great passer, but he's very capable. Whenever he, catches the ball, he's very capable of putting the ball on the deck once or twice and then going up and finding a way to finish. He finished last night with 23 points. I think he only missed one shot. Yeah, two shots. 23 points, 9 of 11 from the floor, 5 of 5 from the free throw line, which is really big for him. He struggled to make free throws at different points this year. And he had 8 rebounds and 2 blocks to go with it, only committed 2 fouls as well, which is really important. He played incredibly well, and he's been, the star of this Indiana team as of late. And last night, Mike Woodson was asked why Omar Ballo has been so good as of late.
He's playing better. He's gotten better. We featured him. He's a big piece to the puzzle. That's why we brought him here to play center for us. No, he's played well, and he's going to have to continue to play well the rest of the way through the Big Ten, because teams are going to force him to play.
Mike Woodson right there talking about Omar Ballo and just the impact that he had last night on the game, and just the impact that he's had in general. And I love that he refuses to throw Malik Reneau under the bus, even though he knows that part of why Omar Ballo has been so dominant is because Malik Reneau hasn't been there. There's a lot more space. Ballo's not having to share touches with Malik Reneau. And look, he has to be on the floor as long as Malik Reneau's out. Like, the 7 minutes that he did not play last night were absolutely brutal. Like when he's not on the floor, they are not a good team. Sorry, Langdon Hatton. You play hard, you rebound, but you are not a Big Ten center. I appreciate the effort, but Indiana needs Malik Reneau back just for the depth that he provides. Indiana needs Omar Ballo on the floor for the rim protection and the offense that he provides as well. He just continues to be incredibly dominant. He was, the number one ranked transfer in the transfer portal for this reason. He is an absolute dude when he wants to be. And I don't know what Mike Woodson said to Omar Ballo, but whatever he did after the incident before Winthrop, I mean, it's worked. And he's absolutely rolling right now. And Malik Reneau is hopefully going to return soon from his injury. And this is going to be a major talking point up until this happens. And if Malik Reneau comes back and Indiana's back to 3 out, 2 in, and they start losing again, then Indiana fans are going to go absolutely wild. But when Malik Reneau comes back, like he's going to play a lot. I do think, because I don't think Mike Woodson's an idiot, I do think that we'll see him and Omar Ballo split up more. Like we'll have more 4 out, 1 in lineups. But don't get me wrong, like there will be times where they overlap and they play together. I just don't think that those instances will be as much as they were earlier in the season. And someone asked Mike Woodson last night about Malik Reneau and how much things are going to change when he comes back. Mike Woodson, pretty direct to the point here, laying it out that not much is going to change.
Well, it gives us better space, but make no mistake about it, Malik is a big part of what we do. So, he's not going anywhere.
Yeah, Malik Reneau's not going anywhere, and he shouldn't. I mean, the dude is a really good basketball player. You can never have too many guys that you throw the ball into and say, hey, go get me a bucket. And Malik Reneau is a guy that if you give him the basketball, he can go and get you a bucket. Okay? And it's just really impressive from Malik Reneau when he's on the floor. He's also a very gifted passer. He makes Indiana better beyond just providing depth behind Omar Ballo. Like he gives them flexibility. And I think I talked about this a little bit yesterday, but lineup flexibility is a really nice thing to have, right? Like if you can only play one way, then you're pretty easy to counter. But when you have multiple ways you can play, like for example, for Indiana, like being flexible to being capable of going to, 2 bigs is like that's a major advantage. If they want, they can go small when Malik Reneau comes back and they can play him at the 5 and they can play with a better pace, in which they've done better here as of late. And so he just gives them more lineup flexibility, which is really important. He's not going anywhere. He is their leading scorer. Like let's not forget how talented of a scorer Malik Reneau is. He's a decent athlete. He can protect the rim. He rebounds. And so he's not going anywhere. I can't wait till he comes back. Figuring out how they kind of fold him into all of this, I think is going to be fascinating. The last thing that I noticed from Indiana last night was, USC was kind of hanging around towards the end of the second half. I think around like the 4 or 5 minute mark. Omar Ballo went out for like 2, maybe 3 minutes. He comes back in. USC's only down by like 7. And Indiana needed to score every time down to keep USC at bay and or to extend the lead. And I love seeing what teams go to. Like what play are you going to call? Whose hands are you going to put the ball in? And Indiana, when they needed a bucket, went to a Trey Galloway, Omar Ballo, screen and roll. And they got them a good shot every single time, right? Omar Ballo had a couple dunks, a layup. Trey Galloway hit like a tough little floater. He found, open guys. Like Trey Galloway is so much better this year than he was last year. And it's kind of incredible. Like he's just making smart decisions with the basketball. He's shooting the ball incredibly well. Also, really impressive from Indiana how they put up 82 points last night, considering they only shot 29% from 3. Like just a really impressive performance from them. Part of that is because they finally shot the ball well as a team from the free throw line, 18 of 23. They rebounded well, 40 rebounds. I mean, they just played an incredibly complete game. It was a lot of fun to watch. Trey Galloway was excellent. 6 assists to go along with 11 points. Miles Rice, his ability to get into the lane and make free and get to the free throw line. He was 9 of 11 from the line last night. Miles Rice also played a really impressive game. I mean, Indiana played awesome last night. It looked a little bit different because they weren't making all of their threes like they had been as of late, but still finding a way to win, still finding a way to manufacture good shots was incredibly impressive. And hopefully this continues going forward. They're set up to play Iowa on Saturday night, 8:00 on Fox. I can't wait. I'll be tuned into it because this Indiana basketball team is legitimately good, and they are a fun team to watch. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, something else that's going to be fun to watch. Notre Dame taking on Penn State. Shehan Jeyarajah, college football writer over at CBS Sports, he is set to join me. We're going to talk Penn State, Notre Dame, and then we're also, of course, going to talk about Texas and Ohio State, that game happening tomorrow night. So the interview with Shehan Jeyarajah is coming your way here in about 4 minutes.
Often imitated, never duplicated. The Real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you're having a nice day. Week is almost over, and it's going to go a little bit faster now because we got football starting up tonight with Penn State taking on Notre Dame. Shehan Jeyarajah, college football writer over at CBSSports.com, joins the show. Shehan, what's going on, man?
Nothing much. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Is this the Final Four that you predicted?
Well, I decided to go out on a little bit of a limb, and I picked SMU to pull the upset in the first round over Penn State, but it was a little bit more of a well, there's going to be a Cinderella somewhere, right? And of course, Arizona State came pretty close. It didn't end up happening, though. But other than that, this was the Final Four that I predicted going in.
That's good for you. I didn't think Notre Dame would beat Georgia. They really impressed me. Just the defense and the special teams. I still have a hard time, though, I think, with the lack of explosiveness in Notre Dame's offense. Are you concerned about that at all tonight in their matchup against Penn State?
A little bit, for sure. Again, so I picked Notre Dame to beat Georgia, then beat in my matchup SMU, but to make the national championship game initially. And I do have them as my favorite heading into this game, but there are definite warning signs for this team, especially like you mentioned on the offensive side of the ball. I know that people think of Georgia as having a really high defensive reputation, but this has definitely not been the best Georgia defense that we've seen over the past couple of years. Penn State really, both passing and rushing defense, has rated better than them across the board. And so I do think that this is a Notre Dame team that probably can't get away with only kind of relying on the running game. And two pieces that I look at, especially from that Georgia game, is, one, Notre Dame scored a lot of their points on short fields, whether it was the turnover within their own red zone that they were able to convert into an 11-yard touchdown. Obviously, they had a special teams touchdown as well. So, they really didn't have a lot of success offensively. And I think that Penn State is going to make less mistakes on offense than Georgia did, which obviously, again, they gifted Notre Dame a couple of points. The other thing, too, is that I'm worried that their offense, especially with Jeremiah Love dealing with injuries, I don't know how many answers they have. I think that against Georgia, the big answer that they had was Riley Leonard at quarterback, but I think that Penn State is good enough to limit that aspect of the game. So, I think that it's going to be a very close matchup. Certainly, Penn State has their own problems that I'm curious how Notre Dame can exploit, but I definitely do have a little bit more fear heading into this one than I did against Georgia.
Do you have any sort of a read on how much Abdul Carter is going to play for Penn State? Because you could argue, their best player, period, on either side of the ball. He'll have a big impact if he plays, obviously. Do you have any sort of a read on whether or not he's going to play tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a pretty good argument that he's the best defensive player left in the college football playoff. So he is obviously going to be a big factor. When you look at that Boise State game, when he went out, that was when Boise State's offense really started to get going a little bit, and they went up and down the field. It seems like he's going to play. James Franklin said yesterday that the plan is for him to play. He will be a game time decision, but they do expect him to play. The signs coming out of their camp have been relatively positive. So, look, I mean, the thing is, you obviously don't know until the bullets are flying just how active he's going to be able to be and how much he's going to be able to play. I do think, though, that we're going to see I do think that he's going to be a relatively full-time player for them, short of a setback during the game.
Joined by Shehan Jeyarajah of CBS Sports. He writes about college football over at CBSSports.com. You should read all of his stuff because he's a fantastic writer. I think one of the fun things about Notre Dame is this is the highest approval rating Notre Dame has had in a really long time. People love Marcus Freeman. I think of all the head coaches left, he probably has the highest approval rating as well. What has he done differently than Brian Kelly to allow his Notre Dame team to beat a team like Georgia?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think from a personal perspective, when you talk about high approval rating, right? Like, he is just a very transparent guy. He's somebody who is willing to, be fired up on the sideline, willing to fight for his players in just a different kind of way. And I think that people really gravitate towards that. I don't think that every former player is necessarily a good coach, but I think that he really has managed to embody the best of being a former player and of being a head coach as well. When you talk about on the field, this has been a multi-year journey for them to build up roster depth. You even saw the first year that Marcus Freeman came in, that Notre Dame's recruiting ratings increased dramatically, and it's only continued over the past couple of years. I think of some of the players who have been big parts of this team, whether it's Drake Bowen at linebacker or Jalen Sneed, like these are guys who typically weren't committing to Notre Dame. And they've had the strength and power of their roster historically. It's been the team speed that they haven't have had. And I think that if you watch them against Georgia, both on offense and defense, frankly, that has been addressed in a huge way. They were actually dominating Georgia in a lot of ways with their team speed, which again is just not something that you would have ever seen during the Brian Kelly era. And so, again, I do think that it is relevant, right? Like you look at Notre Dame, they're entering the NIL and transfer portal era, and I think that they're a program that, especially with the resources that they have, they I think were always a good buy candidate whenever we entered more of a paper play era, just because of the resources that they had. But I think that that Marcus Freeman has done a sensational job of maximizing what he has, of addressing some of the shortcomings. Now, I will say too, when you talk about winning a national championship, I think the last piece that they really, really have to address is they've got to find a way to fix that passing game. Obviously Riley Leonard he's been a little banged up this year, and I think that's limited his passing ability. For Sam Hartman last year, they just weren't able to put together the weapons consistently against good teams. So that, I feel like, is the last piece in terms of them actually winning the championship. I think that's something that makes it a little bit more complicated this year. But every other aspect of this team, whether it's team depth, team speed, I think that they've done a tremendous job of getting this to championship level.
I think you're exactly right. Joined by Shehan Jeyarajah of CBS Sports. He covers college football. Shehan, you had an awesome tweet the other day where you were talking about Kirk Herbstreit, and you were talking about how in this industry, if you make a big take and you're wrong, you just have to eat it. And for me, I've been very adamantly against Notre Dame all year. It's taken me quite a while to come around to it, just because, just looking at the Marcus Freeman era, they lose to Marshall, they lose to a Stanford team that went 3-9. I think that was 2 years ago. This year they lose to Northern Illinois, and just seeing all these, I'm just kind of yeah, it's really hard for me to buy in. What do you think has changed for Notre Dame this year after that loss to Northern Illinois?
Yeah, well, I think that for Notre Dame, I think that they just need to be steady sometimes, right? I think that when you have a game like you had against Northern Illinois, Marcus Freeman said after that game, I probably put a little bit too much on them to not have a letdown after the game that they had against Texas A&M, where they outlast them and score a last-second touchdown. So I think for them, it's been sort of finding a balance of how do we elevate ourselves, but how do we stay steady at the same time. I think, if there's a criticism of the Freeman era, right, that's been it, that they haven't necessarily showed up the same way every single week. I think that since that Northern Illinois game, though, that's changed in a big way. I think that they have some really good veteran leaders on this team that have played a role in that, whether it's Riley Leonard, you talk about some of the guys like Howard Cross on defense, Xavier Watts in his final year of eligibility. I think that this program has needed to kind of settle down and just let themselves be great. I think for so long, I mean, again, it's funny to talk this way about Notre Dame, but Notre Dame has been the team that had to punch up against the best teams in college football, whether the Alabamas or the Georgias or whoever. And I think that it required a bit of a mindset change to say, we don't have to punch up. We just have to go out and do what we do consistently. And I think that, again, The other piece too is that I look at some of the staff that they've brought in, whether it's Mike Denbrock coming over after coaching Jaden Daniels to a Heisman Trophy. Obviously, Al Golden, I think, has done a tremendous job at defensive coordinator. Like, they've just done such a good job. And actually, I want to shout out Marty Biaggi too, their special teams coach, who actually covered back in North Texas back in 2018. And I think, he's done such a tremendous job with that unit too. So I think they've just gotten steadier as the years have gone on. And I think we're starting to see this final form of the Marcus Freeman era round into shape.
Yeah, they look really, really good right now. They're very consistent, and that's why they beat Georgia last week. They don't beat themselves. And, you mentioned, the special teams has been a really large part of why they've won some of these games. But tonight they're playing a team in Penn State that is very talented, very stout on defense. What does Penn State have to do tonight to beat Notre Dame?
Yeah, I think the big thing is that Penn State is much more prepared to go down the field and be an offensive threat than Notre Dame is. So if I'm Penn State, first of all, you got to find a way to counter that quarterback run on defense. I think that Penn State is set up pretty nicely to do so, just with the talent that they have at all three levels of the defense. But I think that this is going to come down to whether Penn State can create some offense. We've seen moments of incredible stuff from Drew Aller at quarterback, but it hasn't been consistent. It hasn't been play to play, down to down. It's been kind of moments flung few and far between. If I'm Penn State, I want to try to hit on an early shot downfield. We've seen that Drew Aller is capable of it, but obviously it's a different kind of challenge. I think that the other thing too is that you want to try to move Tyler Warren, their tight end, around a lot. Try to get him matched up on smaller safeties or slower linebackers. I think that they've had a lot of success with that. And the other piece too is, if there's one thing that probably concerns me most about Notre Dame throughout this playoff, it's that they have started to lose guys to injury. And if I'm Penn State, I want to set the tone early and often that we are going to go straight at their talented defensive line. They're down 3 of their top defensive linemen, including their sack leader, Riley Mills, at defensive tackle. I think that you want to try to use the misdirection to try to attack that defensive line early and get them off balance. So I think for Penn State, look, I mean, I don't think this is going to be a very high-scoring game regardless, but I think that if you're Penn State, you probably embrace the opportunity to try to put up some points, because I don't think that Notre Dame is going to be able to match you if you can.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. Tyler Warren's going to be a huge part of this game. And I'm about to ask you a question that I never thought I would ask, especially after last year, but is Drew Aller the best quarterback left amongst these 4 teams?
It's a fair question. It's a fair question. I was actually contemplating this specific question a few days ago, because what I said. I wrote a piece about why Texas can win the national championship. By the way, we did one for each of the 4 teams remaining, of course. And with Texas, right, the thing that they have is that in Quinn Ewers is that they have a quarterback who obviously has seen a lot of football. And, I pointed to that 4th and 13 play where he adjusts the max protection, he audibles to get them into a good look. I don't think that many of the other quarterbacks left are doing that at this level, because very few of them have been in their systems for multiple years. Now, I think that Drew Aller is the most talented quarterback remaining. You've seen these moments. You've seen the way that he's kind of mind melded in some ways with his offensive coordinator, Andy Kotelnicki. I think that he probably more than anybody else has the ability to change the game with his arm. Of course, you do have to factor in, right, that while I don't think Will Howard at Ohio State is the best quarterback left, they are going to have the best passing game because they have the best receivers. But I think that there's a decent argument that Drew Aller at least has a very serious case to be the best quarterback remaining.
He's really good. He's gotten so much better from last year to this year. Just a little more calming. Then again, it helps when you have a guy like Tyler Warren. When you're in trouble, you can just be like, where is Tyler? Let's just get this guy a shot, because that dude's just an absolute beast. And I'm glad that you brought up Quinn Ewers and this Texas team, because it seems like everyone and their mother is picking Ohio State tomorrow night. No one is really giving much of Texas any sort of chance, which I'm saying right now, I'm taking Ohio State. just because they've looked awesome. But my concern is I think the best version of Texas can compete with Ohio State, potentially even beat them. And I just feel like we haven't seen that version of them all year. Do you kind of feel the same way about Texas and how we've yet to kind of see their full potential?
Well, I think that the big thing for me is that I think that Texas is a little miscast because people see Steve Sarkisian, see the number one quarterback, they watched them last year and think that this is a really good offensive team. But like, this is an elite defensive team. Like, this is a team that has, I think that you could make the case they have the best defense in all of college football, especially when you look at that secondary. And like, they're fine on offense. They're good. But I don't think that they have the pieces to be as elite as people think that they can be. When I look at this matchup, the thing that really scares me for Texas heading into this game is I'm worried that Ohio State is going to completely erase their rushing offense. You look at them against Arizona State last week. You look at them in the two Georgia games, they averaged 1 yard per carry in all three of those games. And Ohio State, to me, is a better rush defense than any of those other defenses that they've played this season. You've also had moments where the run game has popped off. Like, I think the Texas A&M game looks pretty encouraging. I think that obviously that first round against Clemson, though Clemson's not very good against the run this year. Like, there are moments where they show flashes. I just worry that heading into a big spot against a really motivated defense that has playmakers at all three levels, if you can't run the ball and everything is on your passing game, it's just a tough position to be in. Now, what I do want people to understand is that when you talk about Ohio State's receivers, they have not seen anything like this Texas secondary. They have the Thorpe Award winner in Jahdae Barron back there who plays a lot of nickel for them, plays some slot corner. They've got All-American who started as a walk-on and Michael Taff at safety. They've got Andrew Makuba, who was a star at Clemson before coming into Texas. Like, this is as good a secondary as there is in college football. And by the way, their defensive line might be even better than that with some of the guys that they have back there. So I do think that Texas is going to be able to cause some real issues for this Ohio State offense. I don't think it's going to be as easy as it's been the first two rounds of the playoffs, because I think that Texas is like not just better defensively than Oregon and Tennessee, who have great defenses, but is like way better than both these teams. I just worry that they won't be able to hang on to the ball long enough without being able to run it.
Yeah, no doubt. Joined by Shehan Jeyarajah. I'm so glad you brought up this Texas defense, because I've been saying really since the start of the playoff that Texas's defense is the most underrated unit in the playoff as a whole, and I think it's for all the reasons that you mentioned. Like, Steve Sarkisian is an offensive-minded head coach. They've got a quarterback in Quinn Ewers that people love, and you just kind of forget that they've got a bunch of NFL-level guys on this defense, and I am super intrigued to see how they deal with Ohio State's receivers, and I think it's going to be a fantastic matchup. I am curious your thoughts, though, on why do you think it took Ohio State so long to finally look like this? Because I feel like people were expecting this high-octane offense version of them all year, and we didn't really see it until after the loss to Michigan.
I'm obviously just as curious in some ways as you. I think that when you look at Ohio State across the season, they have just mentally, I think, a Michigan problem, right? Because I think that when you look across the season and when you look at the way that they game plan for so much of the season, it feels like Ryan Day kind of went into this as, you know what, we have to win, but we can't just win. We have to win in the way that Michigan wants to win, right? Like, we have to prove that we're even more physical than Michigan. We have to prove that we can run the ball even better than Michigan. And obviously, I mean, I think that that's a ridiculous way to approach your roster. And I think that heading into the playoffs, and this was something that I wondered and predicted in some ways, I felt like after losing to Michigan and after losing 2 games in the regular season, like, the idea of winning your way is off. You just have to win however you can. And I think in the first 2 rounds of the playoff, they've done it. They've leaned on their passing game. They've obviously leaned a lot on Jeremiah Smith. He's had two games with 13 catches for 290 yards and 4 touchdowns, which is just unbelievable against the level of talent that they're playing right now. And I think that the other piece too is that there are a couple guys on that defense that I think have taken this moment personally. And the biggest one that I'd point to is Jack Sawyer at defensive end. He was a top 5 national recruit back in the class of 2021 and just hasn't played like it for most of his career. But over the last 4 games, he has completely taken over. He has 3.5 sacks in the college football playoff alone. And so I think that they just got out of this idea that we have to live a certain way, we have to play a certain way, we have to Big Ten it up, and they're just like, you know what, let's go out and win football games. And I think that, I've said it all year long, this roster is the most talented in college football, and I think it's actually harder to figure out who's second because they're so far ahead of everybody else. And finally, I think in the playoff, they've just said, you know what, let's just go out and win.
That's kind of how I feel about it. I love the last thing that you said there. It's hard to figure out who the second best team is because Ohio State is just so far further out in front of everybody else, and like they're just super talented. And the other thing is they're very experienced. Like a lot of their better players are older, especially on defense. When you look through it, it's like a bunch of juniors and seniors, and I think 2 sophomores, and one of the sophomores is Caleb Downs, who's arguably the best defensive player in all of college football. It's just they're loaded, as you were saying. Who do you like tonight, and who do you like tomorrow night?
Yeah, I formally picked Notre Dame to win this game. I picked them to make my national championship game heading into the playoff, and no reason to skew now. But I do think that I do think that Penn State's going to have a very legitimate chance to win this game if they can do some things right. I do actually think that from a game management perspective, that's something that could come into play. And I really prefer Notre Dame in those moments than I do Penn State. So I'll ride with Notre Dame, but I don't feel the most confident about it. And then, in tomorrow's game, which I'll be at, I think that Ohio State does ultimately run away with it. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I don't think it's going to be like these first 2 rounds of the playoffs necessarily, but I also don't think that it's going to be very close. Again, I think that Texas is going to be able to cause some issues. If I'm Texas, and obviously I'm not Pete Kwiatkowski, their defensive coordinator, I might try to bring some unique pressures early to get Will Howard out of sorts, because when you look at their 2 losses, Will Howard had really poor games and really poor moments, especially in both of the losses that Ohio State took this season. So that would be my plan, but I think Ohio State goes through, and I think Ohio State ultimately does win the national championship in Atlanta.
Yeah, that's kind of that is where I'm at as well. The game tonight, I think, is way more intriguing. The way that you were kind of talking about Notre Dame and Penn State, I'm going to assume here. So if I'm wrong, please tell me. I feel like you're in a similar spot to me where like I'm taking Notre Dame tonight just because I trust Marcus Freeman to not make mistakes in big spots, unlike James Franklin, who has struggled in big games in the past. Is that weighing into your pick at all?
I think it does. I think that when I look at Marcus Freeman, he is just so, versatile, I guess, is the word that I'd use. Like, he is somebody who I think has just an extreme humility to the way that he approaches coaching. And I don't mean that James Franklin does, but I just think that Marcus Freeman is pretty special in that aspect. You look at the amount of influences he pulls on, right? Like he really leans hard into the analytics. He's willing to listen to that side of things. He's willing to listen to the game management side of things. Like, I just think that Marcus Freeman is a very curious coach who I think finds ways to maximize the little things. And from a roster perspective, I think that there's a decent case that Penn State comes in with a little bit more juice than Notre Dame, but I do trust Marcus Freeman and that staff at large, not just Freeman himself, to maximize every opportunity that they have.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it as well. How awesome would it be though? Like this would be my favorite outcome if Penn State goes on a run, they win tonight, and then they beat Ohio State in the national title game. I think that would be incredible. I think that would be my favorite outcome.
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? The thing that's great about all of this is that I don't want to sit here and act like it's little sisters of the poor in this last 4. It's 3 blue bloods, but you look at these programs and all four of them are programs that over the last essentially 20 years have been defined by not being able to get over the top. And, none of them have won a single national championship since 2014. Ohio State's 2014 title is the only CFP title that any of these programs have. And then Texas is the only other program that even won in the BCS era. For Penn State and for Notre Dame, you have to go back to the 80s before we even had unified national championships. So, these are four fan bases who, yes, are big time blue blood, well-moneyed fan bases, absolutely, but who also haven't been on this stage very consistently over the past 20 years. And I think it's really cool. To me, this has been one of the reasons that this playoff has been such a tremendous success. Again, if we had a 4-team field, multiple of these teams would not have been in. Notre Dame would not have been in. Ohio State would not have been in. There's a pretty good chance that those are the two teams playing for a national championship. If we had the BCS, it would have been Georgia versus Oregon in the national championship game. Two teams that didn't even win a single college football playoff game this year. So I think this has just been a tremendous season, a tremendous success for the system. And I will say, too, if Ohio State does win, there's something fitting about Ohio State winning their last title in the first year of the 4-team and then coming back and winning their second title of this run in the first year of the 12-team.
I think that's a great point. We'll have Ohio State fans asking to change the format every year. It'll be great. Shehan,
I'm sure they'd be down for that.
I'm sure they would. Shehan, thanks for your time, man, as always.
Thank you so much for having me.
See ya. That is Shehan Jeyarajah. You can follow him on Twitter at Shehan Jeyarajah. You can read all his stuff over at cbssports.com. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, I will give you my full thoughts on Penn State, Notre Dame, which happens tonight. I don't know what time, but I can't wait for it. My thoughts on Notre Dame, Penn State when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Unfiltered takes live here. The Real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you're having a nice week. I lied. I am actually going to do my Notre Dame Penn State thoughts later because I don't have time to give you everything going on in this big old brain of mine. So Luke Brennaman, he's set to join me coming up here in about 10 minutes, and we're going to talk about IU last night. We'll also probably get into a little bit of Penn State and Notre Dame as well. But tonight there's a basketball game on that I will be watching because I'm just absolutely fascinated as to what it's going to turn out. We've got Purdue playing against Rutgers. And look, if you've listened to the show for any length of time, then you know that I love the NBA, okay? Cavs Thunder last night. I hope you watched it. It was fantastic. So Purdue plays Rutgers tonight. Rutgers has, Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, two guys that are probably going to be like top 10 picks. Okay. And then you got Braden Smith, who's a junior, and he's going to be taking on Dylan Harper. We got this experience against raw talent, and I think it's going to be absolute cinema. Braden Smith is probably the best point guard in the Big Ten, was probably the best point guard in the Big Ten last year. And tonight, he's going to play one of the most talented players in the country, a guy in Dylan Harper who has a legit bid to be the number one overall pick in the draft. He's averaging 21.5 points per game. IU fans, be happy you didn't have to deal with this kid because he's the real deal. He can shoot it. He's at 37% from three, 52% from the floor. He's quick. He's a good passer. He just checks all of the boxes of NBA lottery pick. He's 6'6", super athletic. He is a lot of things that Braden Smith is not. Braden Smith is this small, scrappy guard who shoots the ball incredibly well, makes good decisions most of the time, sets up his teammates, gets everyone involved. But he's not very big. He's not very athletic. He just knows where he needs to be and where everyone else needs to be at all times, which is a major advantage to have. And I think this matchup is going to be fascinating because both players are very different, but very, very good in their own rights. And I can't wait. Purdue should win this game because, look, they're just more experienced and top to bottom. They're probably more talented than Rutgers is. But Dylan Harper, who's top 10 in the country in scoring, is going to play tonight. And that matchup between him and Braden Smith, I think, is going to be incredible. And then Purdue also has to deal with Ace Bailey, who scored 39 against Indiana. Yeah, that big dude who just kept shooting over everybody, and he's so good. I can't wait to watch this game because Rutgers, I think, poses some issues to Purdue because they are athletic and they do have top-end talent. And then you got Purdue, who's going to go out there and they're going to be Purdue. They're going to make the right play. They're going to play really good team defense. They're going to move the ball on offense. Shooter's going to be running around. They're going to set really good screens. They're going to look to rebound the ball well. And then it's like, does that style, which I think that it will, hold up against these two absolute phenoms that Rutgers has? I can't wait to watch this matchup between these 2 point guards and Braden Smith and Dylan Harper. And I can't wait to see how Matt Painter tries to deal with Ace Bailey and just the talent that he has. And so I think that game tonight is going to be spectacular. Something that will be more spectacular is my interview coming up with Luke Brennaman. I mean, the guy is smart, covers Indiana football, obviously follows their basketball team as well, because who goes to IU and doesn't follow the basketball team? I mean, come on now. So Luke Brennaman, he's set to join me coming up here at 11 o'clock. Penn State, Notre Dame tonight. I'm going to get my thoughts out about that game at some point here in the second hour, hopefully, at around 11:20, 11:30, somewhere in there. But Luke Brennaman, he's set to join me coming up here in about 5 minutes.
Life, it's full of moments, from first steps to first loves, moments that make life special. Now, life can also bring us difficult and disruptive moments like a cancer diagnosis. which is why the groundbreaking work of Stand Up to Cancer is so vital. They know the problem of cancer won't be solved by one doctor, one lab, or one hospital. It takes collaboration. That's why Stand Up to Cancer brings together top minds from different fields to find new and better treatments so patients can thrive. So when it matters, we can all show up for moments of a lifetime. Please join Stand Up to Cancer and Myrtle Beach to help families get back to where they belong, making new memories for years to come. Please go to standuptocancer.org to see how you can join the mission.
It's time for the real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you are tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Twitter, 1430 AM, the Indy Sports Ticket app. It is greatly appreciated. Joining me now, it's Luke Brennaman, IU student reporter. Luke, what is going on, man?
Nothing much. Thanks for having me on. I feel like I'm becoming a regular, and I really like the Real Jonathan Smith show. It's always a highlight of my week. So thanks for having me back, man.
Of course, man. Of course. You're a smart guy. You have a lot of energy, which is great.
Thank you.
So yeah, it's good. Let's start with last night. Indiana playing against USC. What are your thoughts on IU here last night, and really just as of late? They're rolling. They've won 5 in a row now.
To be quite honest, I loved it. I think the last time we talked was well before the new year, and I was really low on Indiana, and I wasn't scared to say that. I think I said some things earlier in the year that maybe some people wouldn't agree with, say you're jumping to conclusions, but I personally thought when you spend the money that Indiana did in the transfer portal and you bring in depth, there is no question that this team is deep. They have guys who can score, but it's how are they scoring and finding their own in a new Mike Woodson offense and an Indiana team. And it feels like it's starting to come together. And the reason I liked last night so much in specific is you score 82 points in the Big Ten. That's typically good enough to win. 85 to 90 is probably desirable. But Indiana only shot it at 43%. We've seen Indiana struggle mightily from the field. And yes, they did at the start of the game when they found themselves down double digits. But this is almost similar to Rutgers. These are both games that Indiana should have won. They were 7-point favorites last night. At Rutgers, it was around 8-point favorites. And they both started slow, and they found new ways to win. Obviously, the defense was there, but Balu's really turning it on. I think Trey Galloway is becoming one of the better playmakers on this team. And then obviously Miles Rice. I mean, talk about stuffing the stat sheet for a college game. I think altogether, Indiana played one of their most complete games last night for the last, say, 30, 25 minutes, because the first 10 were ugly. We can't ignore that. But for the sake of the grand scheme of things, they're doing what they need to do inside the conference right now, because if you start taking a look at that schedule, it is going to ramp up fast.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. They just came out kind of flat. I didn't think that they defended the ball very well, especially ball screens. And then, they had 6 turnovers last night. 4 of those 6 came in the first 8 minutes of the game. And I think you're exactly right. Like the last 32 minutes of the game, I mean, Indiana just ran away with it. They outscored USC 71-50. And it was just a lot of little things. I thought that they got Ballo a little bit more involved, and he's someone that we have to talk about ever since the Winthrop bar incident suspension thing. He's been awesome. And part of that has been because Malik Reneau hasn't been out there. What do you think Indiana does with him when he comes back?
Well, I can't tell you what they're going to do, because I'm sitting on my hands waiting. I mean, pretty much dying to see what they do, because this is going to become something that everyone's going to write about the second it happens, because there's this phrase going around Indiana Twitter and all the writers saying, addition by subtraction. And what they're referring to is by not having Reneau, it forces Indiana to only play one big on the interior. And it's kind of an interesting dynamic, because like the Cleveland Cavaliers in the NBA are dominating with 2 bigs, but Mobley can shoot the 3, and Jared Allen's kind of like a Balu type player where he's on the inside. The reason I refer to that is because Malik Reneau can't shoot. Although he shoots 3 sometimes too, he's a post scorer, and he's also not very big for a power forward. So he needs space on that block to operate and really, do those like lefty hook shots that he can be so dominant. And with the 7-footer and Balu just standing there, it kind of brings a double team and doesn't let either of them operate. So a lot of Indiana fans have been calling for kind of a platooning idea of play one of them 20 minutes and the other 20 minutes. If you want to play them together for a portion of the game, then fine, but you certainly don't have to do it for a majority of the game. And it's starting to prove like, hey, maybe the writers and fans and people observing the struggles offensively might be right here. But there's no excuse to not have Malik Reneau out there, because I personally think he's the most talented scorer on that entire basketball team. But the idea where we're getting a chance to see Balu and an open lane, and you put Goody, Galloway, and Rice on the floor where you can really spray it around, and they're finally starting to knock down threes. I'm not going to say it's coming together all the way, but this is certainly looking like a new basketball team that can at least compete, because the last time I talked to you, they lost by 20 plus against an unranked Nebraska team. And right now they're taking names inside the conference.
They are. They look really good. Joined by Luke Brennaman, student reporter down there at IU. The Malik Reneau thing to me is really fascinating, because my whole thing is like, you want lineup flexibility. Like, you want to be able to plug and play and try different things. Like, they're going to play Michigan at some point this year. and Michigan plays 2 7-footers. And so, like, you're going to have to have Ballo and Renew on the floor for that game. I also, like, the depth piece is really important. Like, Langdon Hatton, love the effort, man. Like, he tries to rebound and he plays hard for the 7 to 8 minutes that he's getting with Renew out. But there's a pretty noticeable drop off whenever he comes into the game. So I think you're exactly right. Like, we're still going to see a lot of Malik Renew. I do think that we're going to see more of that platooning action where they only have one of them on the floor. But I do think that it's going to be important for them to have both guys down the stretch for both depth and for when they play teams that are a little bit bigger. I'm with you, though. I'm fascinated by what's going to happen with this. And I think that no matter what happens, I feel like it's going to be wrong. Like, I feel like people are going to find some sort of way to be upset with Mike Woodson, no matter what he does when Renew comes back. What do you think the approval rating is of Mike Woodson right now amidst this winning streak?
I think people are starting to, I guess, sit down and take a breath now. I think tempers were very high, and that's rare. I mean, we've seen Michigan State teams who make runs in the tournament, and everyone goes back to saying, remember how many games they lost in November. Remember how poor they were before the new year. Some teams, it takes a while, and some coaches, they're fine with their teams looking ugly in the non-con like India. I mean, they almost lost to Winthrop. Let's not forget about this if we're going to get really high on them. And this is still a team without a ranked win. So we're really going to see if they can play with the big boys, because they go on a gauntlet starting in that last week of January where they might play 6 straight ranked games all inside the Big Ten. I mean, the new expanded Big Ten is going to be an absolute battle. But if you want to look at making the tournament, because you asked about Mike Woodson, his job realistically is you were given a couple $1 million of a roster. This is now, you're settled into Indiana. I really don't think, I'm not going to say excuses, but I'm kind of referring to it that there's not too many around this year. You have depth, you have scores, you have studs, you have returning grads. So when it comes to this team, they got to make the tournament. And it starts with beating the mid to lower third teams in the conference, like USC, like Rutgers is without Dylan Harper playing at home. So they're taking care of business at home. I think Mike Woodson's approval rating is absolutely in the balance in the next 2 games, maybe 3, because you go to Iowa City, and this is a team coming off an overtime win against Nebraska this week. So if you can bounce back on the road and be an unranked Iowa team that just beat Nebraska, who you lost to by 22, that's saying something. And then you're back at home for your first ranked matchup at the Hall, and that's Illinois coming in. And Illinois can score and they can play. They're a lot better than what they're ranked, and everybody in the country knows that after they went to Eugene and beat an Oregon team by 25 plus last week. So I think the next 2 weeks of games are really going to tell you what Mike Woodson's approval rating is. And right now, from his post-game press conferences, he's still not satisfied. I think a lot of writers and guys like us are high on the Hoosiers right now. He has a vision for this team. So right now, I'm trusting Woodson riding out this process.
Yeah, I trust him right now as well. Things are going in the right direction. I'm glad that you brought up that game against Illinois, because Illinois is absolutely loaded. I would argue that they're probably the best team in the Big Ten, even though I feel like I say that about a different team every single week. The depth thing is really interesting for Indiana, because I feel like there's 7 guys that I undoubtedly trust. The starting 5 from last night. Malik Renew. I love Bryson Tucker, the freshman. I think he just has a really good feel for the game. I feel like he's always in the right spot. I think he's a good defender. He tries to rebound. Love his game. And then there's Cannon Carlisle. And there's some possessions where I'm like, really like this kid. Scrappy. He's tough. And then he'll play like a 4-minute stretch where I'm like, can we please get this guy off the floor? What are your kind of thoughts on Carlisle and just kind of the up and down nature that he's had throughout this season?
Well, I'm happy you referred to that, because Tucker and Carlisle as a duo, I think, is going to be the X factor for this team if they want to make any sort of run, whether it's the Big Ten tournament, the NCAA tournament, making the big dance. Because I think when you look at Galloway, I mean, this is a guy who's been here for a while. Rice, he's a stud. He's very talented, although young. And like you said, the rest of the starting five, I mean, these guys can play. Baco didn't score last night, but he is a scorer. Tucker, Carlisle, and I'm not even going to throw in Leo. I'm just going to put the duo of 8 and 9 for Indiana. When those guys click, Indiana is deep. You can use that word because Carlisle, defense travels, and he can play defense. It's more about guarding without fouling for him. He found himself in some trouble with that last night. And then his jump shot. It's kind of weird looking. He's definitely not a shooter, but he's fast. And I think that Mike Woodson has a vision for this team where they run in transition more. He's continued to say that after the game, and I kind of agree with him. I mean, I think that Galloway and Miles Rice are two of the best guards in the Big Ten when it comes to basketball IQ and making the right pass. And in transition, they can really do that. The issue that's holding them back is it takes Umar Ballo at 7'1" a couple of seconds to get down the floor. So it's more going to have to be the guards running out off long rebounds and such. And that's where Tucker and Carlisle are going to feast because you referred it. Tucker has a great feel for the game. He hits those fadeaway mid-range jumpers that he can find himself into. And Carlisle, it's all about pace and not playing out of control. So if he can start to get kind of a hang of things in that 15 to 20 minutes range per game inside the conference, he can get huge minutes, not just on the defensive end, but once he starts scoring, that'll help the team so much more as a whole.
Totally agree. Joined by Luke Brennaman, IU student reporter. I want to transition now to college football, which is, we got the semifinals starting up tonight. Is this the Final Four that you predicted?
It is, and I'm not going to, sit here and boast about that, but I'm fired up. I mean, I work for IU Student Television. This is who I report for, and we did like a little bracketology. And this whole time I've actually had this exact setup, even the way getting here. So I'm starting to feel more confident about it. It is a Notre Dame Ohio State national championship is where it eventually leads to, as predicted. And I think tonight's game, I mean, it's going to be a fun one. The thing I said the whole time about the expanded playoff, in my opinion, was we might get some stinkers. And people are forgetting that in the 4-team playoff, there were plenty of blowouts. I mean, we saw a TCU team pull off one of the biggest upsets in playoff history when they beat Michigan. And then they turned around and got beat by like 60 in the national championship. So I don't really know what the fans were asking for in that regard because they gave you a heck of a semifinal. And then Georgia was just that good. I think there is a drop-off between who's good and great in college football. And the expanded playoff is going to give you, when it's down to the Final Four, I think it's always going to give you 4 great teams. And that's what we have. I mean, Texas-Ohio State is a legacy matchup for so many different reasons and so many different storylines, whether it's current or historical. And then Penn State, Notre Dame, this is 2 of the best defenses in the country going at it, where the X factor of the game is going to be both quarterbacks who are relatively experienced now, with Aller now in what, his 3rd year at Penn State. So I think it's going to be a heck of a Final Four, and I just can't wait for the next 2 nights of games.
I can't either. I think it's going to be fascinating. I was not a fan of the 12-team expansion. I just thought 12 was too many. 6 kind of felt to me more like the right number. But like you said, like, if it's not 12, then we don't get the Arizona State and Texas game, which was phenomenal. Everything else, though, hasn't really felt close. Does Notre Dame making it this far, and I'm with you, I like them tonight over Penn State, does it make you feel better about Indiana losing to them in the first round?
I think it does. I mean, the whole thing that worked out with the SEC, I could go on forever and just name games throughout this bowl season. The biggest one that stands out is Alabama just getting waxed by a Michigan team that Michigan sat a lot of their, I mean, they sat 3 NFL caliber defensive linemen in that game. They were 17.5-point underdogs, and they beat a Bama team that started pretty much everyone, especially on the offensive end. So that put, the SEC chirpers right to sleep. And it helped Indiana's case because looking back on it, people forget Indiana is the last team to beat Michigan this college football season. After Indiana, they went and beat Ohio State, and then they turned around and win their bowl game. So Michigan finished as definitely one of, if not the hottest teams in football, who didn't make a big dance or anything, but they made a splash in their meaningless bowl game, to say the least, because it really did make Indiana look like they deserve to be there. And the thing that I picked up from it, and I sent a tweet out as it happened, is ironically enough, Curt Cignetti in his first year as a head coach, his only 2 losses are against the 2 best defenses in college football. And I'll stand on that. Ohio State is the best defense in college football. And I think Notre Dame has proven now that they're in the Final Four that they're easily the second best defense in college football.
I don't know about
If not the best.
easily. Texas's defense is pretty loaded. I do think that in terms of one side of the ball against the other, I am very intrigued to see what this Texas defense does against Ohio State's offense. They've got the Thorpe Award winner. They have an All-American at safety. They've got a really good front four. That Texas defense, I think, is very legit. I just think that because they're coached by Sarkisian and their starting quarterback is Quinn Ewers, we focus more on that aspect of their teams. But you're right. I mean, the Notre Dame defense is nasty. That defense is why they beat Georgia, forcing not 1 but 2 turnovers. Obviously, the kickoff return for a touchdown was huge in that game as well. But I think you're exactly right. Like, the 2 games that Cignetti has lost this year came to probably the 2 teams that are going to play for a national title, which, I mean, I think has to make everyone feel a little bit better.
Oh, a lot better. I don't really think there's much discussion anymore. And a lot of that stuff was nonsense. It took away from the game, too. It took away from the season. This is the coach of the year. I mean, I get he's cocky, he's confident, and that's going to warrant haters all over the place. That's what happens. That's what you're going to ask for in this day and age if you want to act like that. So they came. But there shouldn't be any hate towards this actual football team or disrespect. They belonged there, and they were also playing with a quarterback who not only had a thumb the size of my face, he was playing on a torn ACL. Not that is any excuse for not playing well, but I'm saying, like, this is an Indiana team that wasn't even fully healthy. They lost to Notre Dame by 10. I know it was kind of some garbage time points that cut the deficit, but Notre Dame might turn around and play in the national championship within the next 24 hours if they can win tonight. So for their only 2 losses to really be potentially against the 2 teams that play in the Natty, that's quite comical, if you ask me.
Yeah, I'm with you. Joined by Luke Brennaman, IU student reporter. What are your thoughts on the transfer class that Indiana has put together so far? They got the highly coveted quarterback from Cal. Outside of that, I don't know very much. What are kind of your thoughts on this transfer class so far?
It's coming. It's kind of a slowly but surely thing. I think Mendoza is the thing that everyone needs to worry about, and in regard to Cignetti, because he's operating this whole thing. He has his guy. This is what we're going to start to see as the norm at Indiana. At least I think, and it looks that way, and that's what he has said throughout the season, talking with him in press conferences, is he loves the transfer portal for the sense of, I can just go to I don't have to develop a guy. And it was kind of in reference of Taven Jackson, in the sense of when Taven was playing midway through the season and getting that time with Rourke injured, people would always ask the questions like, what are you seeing out of Taven? Is he growing? Is he going to be the next guy? And he always went back to saying, I really like the transfer portal and bringing in a guy that you don't have to develop, that you don't have to go through these bumps with. Because, Jonathan, you and I know in college football, if you lose one game, Indiana lost one game at Ohio State, and there was still a slight chance that they didn't get into an expanded college football playoff. So you don't really have any time to mess around and try new things. And that's why he likes to go in to get a guy who's played a lot of football. He is a dual threat, too, in Mendoza, and people don't talk about that too often. He's a bigger guy, but he's sneaky athletic. I think he is going to be a complete stud for this team. Obviously, the portal's not going to tell you how good they're going to be, because we came in with the portal with a bunch of James Madison kids, and it looks like a few of those James Madison kids might be playing on Sundays in the near future. So this coaching staff does a really good job, not just finding guys, but developing as well. So time will tell. They'll get into Indiana and start putting the work in with this new staff. I think it's exciting.
It is exciting. I can't wait for IU football, which is a really weird statement to make. Last question for you, Luke, and I will let you go. I know you're rolling with Notre Dame and Ohio State tomorrow night. Of those 2 teams, though, which do you think is more likely to lose?
Ooh, I like this question. So I always go back to the point spreads. Ohio State's like a 5.5-point favorite. Notre Dame's just a 1-point favorite. So you would think Notre Dame. When it comes to confidence, there's just something that people aren't realizing about this Texas team that they haven't all year. And maybe I'm naive to the fact that they just picked up their first ranked wins of the season in the college football playoff, because their other games, they lost to Georgia in both matchups this season since they've beaten Clemson and Arizona State, who you and I both know aren't, great teams in the sense of Ohio State is a great team. But you talked about it earlier. This Texas defense is really good. They're really athletic and they're really fast. So if you get the Ohio State team we've seen in the college football playoff, no doubt I'm going to tell you that the Notre Dame is probably more subject to lose against a Big Ten opponent with a heck of a defense. But for some reason, I just don't see James Franklin getting a win like this. I don't see Drew Aller getting a win like this. Moreover, I could see Quinn Ewers and Sark picking up just an absolute shocker on Friday night. So that's definitely not the consensus answer, and people are going to call you a fool, and Ohio State's, minus 275 on the money line? Because that's certainly an underdog pick to stay Texas in that spot. And I'm still rolling with the Buckeyes, but for the sense of that question, I think Ohio State could lose more than Notre Dame. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying Notre Dame is a shoe-in lock to win that game. I mean, it's a coin flip of a matchup. But in my personal opinion, Texas is so much better than what people are valuing as, especially in that betting lines market.
I'm with you. I think the best version of Texas, which I don't think we've seen all year, the offense, it'll have a couple drives a game where you're like, holy crap, this looks like a Steve Sarkisian offense. And then they go back to being pretty mediocre. The best version of Texas, I think, can undoubtedly beat Ohio State. The issue is we haven't seen the best version of Texas all year, and we've definitely seen the best version of Ohio State these last 2 weeks. And I'm with you. I'm not betting against Ohio State the rest of the way. Luke, thanks for your time, man.
Of course. Thank you. I'll see you next time.
See ya. That is Luke Brennaman. You can follow him on Twitter at BrennyPXP, student reporter over at IU, hosts a podcast as well called Dialed In over at Chatterbox Sports. When we come back here in about 4 minutes or so, my full thoughts on Notre Dame and Penn State tonight.
The best takes. The real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in no matter how you are tuning in. We got a big game tonight. Penn State, Notre Dame, spot in the college football national championship game on the line. Can't wait. I'm so excited. I love college football. The game is set to start at 7:30. Should just be, hopefully, just an absolutely awesome game. Oh man, can't wait for this game. Everyone who's listened to the show knows that I am not a big Notre Dame guy. With that being said, I am picking them to beat Penn State tonight. Speaking of Penn State, Abdul Carter, probably their best player. A guy who's going to be a top 10 pick in the NFL draft, just an absolute beast of an edge rusher. He's probably going to play. Who knows how healthy he'll be. He didn't return after getting hurt against Boise State. Part of that, though, could have been because they didn't really need him. They will need him to beat Notre Dame because Notre Dame is going to run the ball like they always do. And Abdul Carter was the Defensive Player of the Year in the Big Ten. He was a consensus All-American. He is their best pass rusher, but he's also pretty stout in the run game as well. And this Penn State defense is really good. It is the best aspect of their team, especially their run defense, only giving up 3.1 yards per carry on the year. And this is another strength-on-strength game like we saw between Notre Dame and Georgia. Notre Dame excels at running the football, and Penn State excels at not allowing other teams to run the football. And that should be just an incredibly fun thing to watch. I expect for Notre Dame's offense to look pretty similar to how it looked against Georgia and how it's looked the entire year. Okay. They will have moments where they really struggle to move the football consistently. They're going to look to run the ball a lot. They're probably not going to throw it very much because they just don't have great receivers on the outside. And when they do move the ball, it'll be 3 yards in a cloud of dust. It'll take 8 minutes off the clock when they do move it. And I think that they'll continue to struggle to throw the football. And I say continue because they only threw for 90 yards against Georgia. I don't think the total will be that low again, but this Penn State secondary is good. This Penn State front seven is very good. They have more interceptions than passing touchdowns on the year. They're surrendering less than 200 passing yards per game. So if Notre Dame wants to run the football or wants to move the football, it's going to be on the ground because this Penn State secondary is very talented. Okay. It's another tough defense that Notre Dame's offense is going to have to deal with, which means that I think this game is going to be pretty similar to what happened against Georgia. I think Notre Dame's offense is going to need some sort of turnover, some sort of big special teams play to allow themselves to put points up on the board. And if they can do that early and if they can take a lead, then they can lean on this defense, this stout Notre Dame defense, and try to hold Penn State off from there. I don't think that they're going to be able to consistently move the ball up and down the field against Penn State. So they're going to need one of the other phases of the game, special teams or defense, to make a big play. Okay. And the good news is this Notre Dame defense is really stout. Okay. They lead the league. They lead the nation in takeaways. Okay. So they are very good at forcing turnovers. Right. And so I'm betting on Notre Dame being able to make one or two big plays on defense that kind of swing the game in their favor. That's going to have to happen because Penn State is more dynamic on offense than Notre Dame. I think Drew Aller's a better quarterback than Riley Leonard. He's probably the best quarterback left. Okay, Penn State has multiple good running backs, just like Notre Dame. Those guys are going to make an impact on the game. But the real difference, and if Penn State wins tonight, it'll be because of this. Penn State can actually throw the ball. Okay, I bring this up every time I talk about Notre Dame, but the fact that Riley Leonard doesn't have a game where he's throwing for 250 yards this year is really concerning. Penn State has multiple games, okay? And so, they have the ability to be dynamic because they've got pretty good wide receivers on the edge, and then they've got Tyler Warren, the best tight end in college football, a guy that Colts fans are going to be clamoring for. Okay, this is going to be a low-scoring slugfest. That is what I expect from this game. So I'm going to take Notre Dame to win. I don't trust James Franklin in big spots. I just don't. Marcus Freeman showed last week that he can win big games by beating a really good Georgia team. But they're going to have to make some sort of big play on defense or special teams to swing the game in their favor. I do think that they find a way to do that. So I'm going to take Notre Dame to beat Penn State. But that being said, Penn State won. I wouldn't be surprised because they are slightly more dynamic on offense. I already went over the defense. They're very stout on that side of the ball. They are undoubtedly more than talented enough to beat Notre Dame. I just don't trust James Franklin. I just don't. And that's ultimately why I'm taking Notre Dame. I just trust Marcus Freeman more than James Franklin. And to Marcus Freeman's credit, he has really changed this Notre Dame program. This edition of Notre Dame is very different from the Brian Kelly version where they beat all the teams that they should have and then got throttled in big time matchups. Okay. So, congrats to Marcus Freeman for I wouldn't say turning this program around, but rather taking it to the next level. Brian Kelly at Notre Dame, completely overrated. I think everyone would agree with that. He's at LSU now, and that program hasn't gotten much better since he showed up. So, Marcus Freeman, he's got it rolling. So good for him. He's a good coach, and I like their chances to punch their ticket into the national championship game. I think that's not this Monday night, but next. And so, Notre Dame, I'm picking you to win. Please don't disappoint me, because if you do, I got my lead for tomorrow. No way around that. We've also got Purdue and Rutgers tonight. Can't wait to watch that. Pacers, they've won 4 in a row, but your Indiana Hoosiers, they look pretty good. Won 5 in a row. They're 13-3. That's 3 of those wins, on this 5-game win streak have come in Big Ten play. They're 4-1 in the conference. They're a really good basketball team, and they're really talented. When Malik Reneau comes back, they're only going to get better. Indiana beat USC last night. My thoughts on that game when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
The best takes, stories, and entertainment. It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket. 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Hopefully you've had a nice day. Big thanks to Shehan Jeyarajah and Luke Brennaman for joining the show earlier today. Just got word on some of the people that the Indianapolis Colts will be interviewing for their new for their defensive coordinator opening. Tom Pelissero on Twitter said that the Colts have begun their defensive coordinator search with former Bengals DC Lou Anarumo. That would be an excellent hire. And longtime NFL coach Steve Wilks. Lou Anarumo, that's the guy. Okay, that is the guy that we want. Okay, former defensive coordinator of the Cincinnati Bengals. And I know what you're going to say. The Cincinnati Bengals defense was terrible this year. Yes, but before that, it was amongst the best in the NFL. You say, well, Jonathan, why was it so bad this year? Talk to their general manager who let so many of their better defensive players leave. We're going to have Zach Gray on tomorrow, as we always do. And he's a huge Bengals fan, so we will ask him about Lou Anarumo and just kind of his thoughts. He'll probably not like him just because that's the way that Zach is, but I like the guy. I think that he would be an excellent hire if the Colts decided to go down that road. Speaking of going down that road, your Indiana Pacers are just rolling through their schedule right now. They won again last night. They finally look good. And it's so nice, and relieving isn't the right word. But look, like they're 2 games over 500 now. They're playing again tomorrow night where they're going to host the Warriors. Hopefully you go to that game, because watching Steph Curry in person is just an amazing experience. Just watching that dude run around all over the floor and just seemingly never get tired. I mean, he is incredible in his own right. But the Pacers have now won 4 games in a row. They beat the Bulls last night, 129 to 113. They did it without the great Miles Turner. Thomas Bryant filled in for him. I think he's a really good backup for Miles Turner, and just the way that he plays. I think he's a pretty similar offensive player, a little bit smaller, so he doesn't protect the rim quite as well as Miles Turner, but not a great three-point shooter, but capable of stepping out and knocking it down. He hit 2 of 4 last night, finishes around the rim pretty well, tough, rebounds, boxes out, does all those small things, sets good screens. He was big for the Pacers last night in their win. Tyrese Halliburton still rolling, right? Finally starting to look, or continuing to look like the guy that he was last year. 16 points for him last night, 13 assists, 7 of 13 from the field, which, you hit 7 shots and you only score 16 points. It tells me that, he like attacked the rim. Sometimes I think he can get a little 3 happy, but that was not the case last night. Got downhill, got to the rim. Siakam just continues to be the definition of consistent. Just another night where he got to his spots and scored. That's just kind of what he does. That's what we've come to expect from him. He had 26. Benedict Mathurin didn't shoot the ball well at all, but he defended his butt off, just, in a stance at all times. He finished with 8 points, 3 of 12 shooting, but he was plus 23, the second highest mark for the Pacers last night. And then my guy, who I'm still holding out hope for, okay? I still haven't sold any of my Jarris Walker stock, holding on to all of it. 12 points last night, 5 of 7 from the floor. He shot it pretty well, made good decisions with the basketball in his hands. 12 points, defended well. The Pacers offensively last night were incredibly impressive because they scored 129 points, which is a lot. But usually when you score 129 points in the NBA, you make a pretty decent amount of threes. And that is not what happened last night with the Pacers. They only made 10. They're a good team. They're starting to play like it. Their ability to get into the paint and score buckets has just been really nice. They're finally starting to play well. They're fun to watch. They're going to host the Warriors tomorrow night. That's another game that they should win, but anytime that you're having to deal with, Steph Curry and the rest of that Warriors team, like, they're going to make things tough on you. So Pacers rolling right now. Hopefully it continues tomorrow night when they play host to the Warriors. Indiana, they're rolling as well. They've won 5 in a row, 3 straight in conference play, 4-1 in conference play overall. This is just a good team. Mike Woodson has this team playing well, and we saw it again last night. They didn't start off super great, but, they figured it out. Those first 8 minutes were rough, right? They came out ill-prepared. They didn't defend ball screens very well. They didn't take good shots. They didn't give, Omar Ballo enough touches down low. So USC, they're up 19-9 after the first 8 minutes. And, they fixed it from there, right? They stopped turning the ball over. Indiana turned the basketball over 6 times last night. 4 of those turnovers came in the first 8 minutes. Okay, Mackenzie Mbako was bad last night. Started 0 of 7 from the floor, finished 0 of 8 from the floor. Okay, he barely played in the second half. It was just a bad opening 8 minutes for Indiana. And then in the final 32 minutes, they dominated that game. Absolutely dominated. Outscored USC 71-50. Okay, they looked like the Indiana team that has now won 5 games in a row. They looked like the Indiana team that's 13-3. They dominated those, last 32 minutes the way that they should have dominated it from the start. Okay, they got good shots. They got to the rim. They gave Omar Ballo the ball. They just looked a lot better. And, as good as they looked last night, like they scored 82 points, which is a lot in the world of college basketball. And they did it with who I think is their most talented offensive player, Mackenzie Mbako, struggling. Here's Mike Woodson talking about them finding a way to put points up, even with Mbako struggling.
No, it is. And that's kind of the makeup of our ball club. Every Big Ten team is talented and deep and well coached. And, when someone is struggling, Mac was struggling tonight. And, I can't, I gotta search too as a coach. That's what we do. And no knock against Mac. He'll be back in there tomorrow and he'll be ready to go hopefully for the Iowa game. But I gotta lean on everybody. And, it's what you do with the minutes that you get. And I thought the guys that came in off the bench gave us some positive minutes tonight, and that set us up to win a ball game.
Mike Woodson right there talking about how the contributions from other players, not named Mackenzie Mbako, who was awful last night, allowed them a chance to win that game. It's a great thing that Luke Goody shot the crap out of the ball last night. It's a good thing that Bryson Tucker came in off the bench and played well. I love watching him play. Bryson Tucker, he was really good last night, scored the ball, played good defense, and like Mackenzie Mbako was supposed to be one of the guys this year. He was the Big Ten Freshman of the Year last year. And for Mike Woodson, at the end of that game when, Indiana was kind of hovering, not in danger zone, but they were up, 7, 8, 9 points that were late. The fact that Mike Woodson was like, no Mbako, we're rolling with Tucker. I think that spoke volumes to, Mike Woodson trusts this guy, and he definitely should have last night because Bryson Tucker played well. I thought he got to his spot offensively early. He had a couple tough mid-range jumpers. I thought he finished at the rim. He took a couple bad shots. Like there's one possession where he plays a little one-on-one, tries to go by his guy, doesn't, takes a really bad shot, and then fouls the guy. Like it was not good. But beside from that, he looks really good. He's a good defender. He's long. He's active. He just has a really nice feel for the game. Like there are some players when they move up and they're, playing college basketball for the first time as a freshman, or they're playing in the NBA for the first time as a rookie, and they don't have the ball in their hands. There are moments where they just look lost and they kind of get in the way of the flow of the offense. You don't see that from Bryson Tucker. He's in the right spot 95% of the time. He plays with real effort. He tries to rebound. He's a good player. I really like him in the way that he plays ball. With that being said, as well as Bryson Tucker played last night, as well as Luke Goody shot the ball last night, Indiana won because Omar Ballo is just a stud. Okay, he was once again incredibly dominant, and every time I watch them, especially during this stretch without Malik Reneau, their their leading scorer. My thought process always comes back to the same thing of they have to have Omar Ballo on the floor. Like he absolutely has to be on the floor at all times because the drop off when Langdon Hatton comes in is just way too big. It just is. And that's no disrespect to him. He plays hard. But Langdon Hatton is not going to score 23 points on 9 of 11 shooting. Like that just isn't going to happen. He doesn't demand a double team the same way that Omar Ballo does. So Hatton, good job for those 7 minutes last night, but Indiana really needs Malik Reneau back because they need another guy who they can dump the ball into and who can go score. You can never have too many guys who you can say, here's the ball, man, go get a shot. And that is what Malik Reneau is. Okay, he's a guy that you can give him the ball and say, go score. And he does. That's what he did last year. That's what he's done this year, in the moments that we've seen him. Okay, so Indiana desperately needs for Malik Reneau to come back. And when he does come back, I think he's going to play a lot. Okay, I do think we'll see him and Ballo platooned a little bit more. I do think we'll see more 4 out, 1 in lineups because I don't think Mike Woodson's an idiot. I think that he's sitting back and he's seeing the space created when Luke Goody's playing the 4. I think he's seeing the space created when it's, Galloway and Rice and Goody, and then insert, Mbako or Bryson Tucker or Cannon Carlisle or whichever other ball handling wing/guard you want to put in there. Like you cannot ignore the spacing and just the better offense that we've seen from Indiana. But Malik Reneau gives them depth. He gives them lineup flexibility. And most importantly, he gives them another guy that they can just give the ball to and say, hey, man, go score. Right? Because that has got to be just the best thing in the world to be like, all right, we got 7 seconds left on the shot clock. Make sure so-and-so, in this case, Malik Reneau touches it. Because if he does, we're probably going to get a good shot. Honestly, when they do those 4 out, 1 in lineups, if they do it with Reneau instead of Ballo when he comes back, the offense will be even better. The defense will take a slight hit because Renew's just not the same rim protector that Omar Ballo is. But Malik Reneau's a better passer than Omar Ballo. I think that his post game as a whole is better than Omar Ballo's. So Malik Reneau, he's not going anywhere. When he comes back, I do think that he's going to make this Indiana team better than what they are right now. The last thing last night that I noticed, and something that I always look for whenever I watch games, is when games are close late and you need a bucket, what are you going to? Right? Like what sets, who are you giving the ball to, who's involved in the play? And last night, late in the game, when, Indiana was up by like 7, 8, or 9, they were trying to kind of fend off USC's final push there. They went to Trey Galloway and Omar Ballo, screen and roll, top of the key, get Trey Galloway going left, and it got them a good shot every time. Omar Ballo had a couple dunks. Trey Galloway hit a little floater. And, I've, raved enough about how good Omar Ballo has played as of late. But we also have to acknowledge Trey Galloway's been really good this year. A guy that I've been tough on. Like, this is year 5, and he's finally good. It's a nice little change of pace. He's making really good decisions with the ball in his hands. He had 6 assists last night. It just kind of feels like the game is finally slowed down for him. I don't feel like he's rushing. I feel like he's taking his time. He's a better shooter this year than he was last year. He looks really good. And if he continues to play at this level, and Omar Ballo continues to play at this level, and Malik Reneau comes back and they figure out how to kind of fold him into this Indiana team that's really surging right now, I mean, they're going to be an absolute problem going forward in what is a really good, really deep Big Ten conference. There's a lot of good teams this year, and there's really no other way to say it. I mean, they're just absolutely loaded. And hopefully this high-level play from Indiana continues because they're really talented. They're only going to get better when Reneau comes back. So we'll see how it goes. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to tune into The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. I'll be back on the air tomorrow from noon to 3. The Dan Dockett Show is coming your way next. It's an absolute monster. Sean Salisbury at 12:30. Mike Lewis, Ball State head coach, at 1 o'clock. Tom Luganbill at 2:30, and then the great Dane Fife at 2 o'clock. Loaded show today for the Dan Dockett Show, and that show comes your way here in about 5 minutes.